Welcome to Lacrosse Now on this Thursday alongside Travis Eldridge. I am Tom Eschen. Appreciate you joining us, and we got another weekend of lacrosse to preview, and it should be a good one, another good one, some great matchups, men and women.
Yeah, we've got huge games to look ahead to, so we're going to go through some topics in the men's game. We're also going to then make some quick picks for the women's games here this week, 10 women's games, so stay tuned for that. And we're joined by the man of the week here, Jacksonville coach John Galloway, joining the show to talk about that big upset of Duke. They also took care of Mercer earlier this week, so a good week to be a Dolphin.
Yeah, I asked him which game meant more, I guess, in terms of what he learned about his squad. You want to stay tuned for that, and at the end of the show, we'll tell you which game specifically we're watching, both the NCAA and NLL over the weekend. But still, we had some games this week, so we'll start off today's program with our midweek moment. Travis, what was the moment of the midweek games for you this week?
So I'm going to go to the women's game because there was a couple of women's games that were as of note in the middle of this week, and a really notable win for a program in Pennsylvania in Drexel. They went to Penn State and beat the Nittany Lions 12-8. First ever win for a Drexel team over Penn State. And now I know the expectations for Drexel are they're higher in the rankings. There are probably more expectations for this Dragons team, maybe even than the Nittany Lions this year after what they did a year ago. But to go to the Big Ten school, the big state school in your state, and go take care of business for the first time is a big moment. They never trailed in the game. Carson Harris and Haley Simpson led the way, 3 goals apiece. Zoe Bennett made 11 saves, only gave up the 8 goals against. Just a really solid win for Drexel, and just yet another step in the right direction for the Dragons.
Yeah, they're so experienced and talented as well. Colleen Grady setting milestone marks there. She's been around for ages, and it just feels like Drexel, this is, and once again, an opportunity for them to reach even higher. And they had the best season in program history last year, and now this year they're trying to top that. And they're going to be contended. They're going to cause some problems for some teams, and I hope at the end of the season, I believe they're going to get in the NCAA tournament. I hope their seed reflects that as well. I hope they get some respect because they deserve it, especially after what they did last year.
Well, and that's what these wins do. You beat Penn State. It just, whether Penn State is a top 3 team in the Big Ten or they're somewhere in the middle of the pack, beating Penn State stands up on a resume at the end of the year. That will help down the road for seeding purposes. Well, what do you got?
Yes, I have Vermont over Penn State men. So Penn State, I'm wrong.
Tough week for the Nittany Lions.
Started the show. I'm sorry, Penn State. But I don't want to talk about Penn State. I want to talk about Vermont in this game. I'm not going to worry about what's going on at Penn State. They've got to figure life out after Grandy Men and Mac O'Keefe. That's what they got to do.
True.
Meanwhile, Vermont, this was such a nice win for them. They win 16-10. And this, of course, they lost to Duke. They competed with Duke in their opening game. And then you lose the Utah at home, and you're kind of scratching your head. I had high hopes for Vermont. A lot of veterans on that squad coming back. You're like, so this game against Penn State, maybe a little bit more. I know it's just February on the line for them in this game. Liam Limoges had a big day, 5 goals. He had just 4 points in the first 2 games combined. So you sort of saw them find what they're all about. Brock Haley, a junior for them, 2 goals, 3 assists. He had 1 point in the first 2 games combined. So you look at the way they played this game and the way they dominated this game. The Penn State goalie, Alaric Fayok, had to make 15 saves. Vermont more than doubled the shots on goal compared to Penn State. So this just wasn't one of those random, close, eke-em-out games. This was a dominating performance for Vermont. Now they go to Brown next time out, but they got about a little more than a week to rest and reset a bit. But I think they're feeling a lot better into this little longer break in the middle of the season after this performance.
Yeah, first of all, I think Liam Limoges has been at Vermont forever. Like that guy just, I mean, it goes to without saying with a lot of these guys. But a huge game for him, and I think you hit the nail on the head. You lose to Utah at home. That was a surprise for Vermont, especially at home. I mean, you're playing at home in February in Burlington. After a good
performance against, I mean, you lost 15-7 to Duke, but that was a little closer in the score indicator.
Yeah, and like I think that was maybe a trap game in between a game between 2 good ones, and so then they go to Penn State and they take care of business, and so they put themselves in the right direction. A big win early in the year.
Their first win over a Big Ten school since 1986, so that's pretty big for that program.
Yeah.
Talk about wins over Big Ten schools, and saw that with Drexel, and we saw that with Vermont.
Absolutely. All right, next topic. Because the Ivy League, we get to see for the first time in like 700 days, the Ivy League will be playing this weekend. Which Ivy League team on the men's side are you most excited to see?
I am excited to see Penn again because I feel like we left this team. I know 2020, a lot of those guys had graduated, but I feel like we left this team with a lot of what ifs and, what could have this team have done and what could have happened with Sam Hanley. And now he is back. They are back, and they play Georgetown, which I think makes it even that much more intriguing because Georgetown, they've got a lot of expectations coming in. So if Penn comes in and really competes with this team, I don't know if they'll win it off the bat coming off of a year and a half of not playing lacrosse, 700-plus days. I just really look forward to seeing what Patrick Birkinshaw can do against that Georgetown attack. Dylan Watson for Georgetown, 6 goals. A lot of talk about Jake Carraway and the fact that who's going to fill that hole. A Hill Academy kid starting off really well for Georgetown against Johns Hopkins. So we'll see what it looks like. Georgetown against guys like Sam Hanley, a really deep midfield for Penn, and who will step up for Penn now with some of those guys that are moved on and in a long time without playing lacrosse. I'm really intrigued as Penn always plays a tough schedule. So how are they going to manage that early on after not playing for so long?
Yeah, no easing into the year. You start off with a bang, a top 10 matchup. For me, I was interested to see how Georgetown performed against Hopkins this weekend, mainly because Hopkins had a couple of games under their belt, including one on Friday before they played Georgetown. And I think the Hoyas kind of let Hopkins hang around early, and then that second half, they kind of put the hammer down.
They held Epstein to 2 goals, which I think after Epstein went off in the first game, or the second game they had this year, that was big for Georgetown to sort of figure that out.
And so I am very interested to see how Penn, in their first game, now handles Georgetown, now that Georgetown has gotten those first game, because there's a feeling out process at the beginning of every season, especially that first game. You have some new pieces, different, and so for Penn, this first half will be really interesting. Can they keep it interesting and then put yourself in a position to win in the second half?
You could say that for every Ivy League team. The first half of all these games.
I agree. It's going to be fascinating. Which leads me to my team, which is Yale, because the last 2 times that they played a full season, they were playing in the national championship game. So you have to look at this roster, despite the fact that pieces from those teams are gone. Still in 2020, they were a team that was top 5 in the country when the season ended, and that was the last time we saw them. And the other 2 times that they finished the year, they were playing on the final day of the season. I think everybody forgets just how much talent is on this team because on top of the pieces they have coming back, they've had now 2 years of recruits that have been really highly regarded recruiting classes that you have coming in. You got a couple of guys in the top 20 in the Inside Lacrosse freshman rankings that'll be making their debut here against Villanova this weekend. And then you got, of course, Matt Brandow, Chris Fake, Brian Tevlin, all back. So I'm going to be so fascinated to see, first of all, what these lineups look like. What do the rotations look like? What kind of freshmen and sophomores who haven't seen the field at all yet? What kind of guys get in there? So much to learn about this Yale team. And Villanova has given them fits over the last several seasons, or last times they've played. I guess you can't say several seasons for Yale because they didn't play last year. But so this is going to be a very interesting matchup to start the year for the Bulldogs.
And I think for these Ivy League teams, something that maybe is a little underestimated. I remember talking to Sam Hanley. You could feel a frustration, a chip on the shoulder. There's a lot of motivation for these kids that haven't played, and they're like, we haven't been part of this party in a long time. And
they had a year taken away.
They feel like despite the fact, like you said, Yale's had all this success, they still feel like they have something to prove because it's been so long since we've seen the Ivy Leagues out there. That's what's like when we talked to Sam Hanley, I was like, wow, he is ready. Like, I'm scared. You should be afraid of maybe some of these teams because they're going to come to play from the get-go because they've been waiting for it, chomping at the bit for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there are we're going to learn something about these Ivy League teams, especially because like a lot of these teams also recruit really well. So not only do you see the teams that we saw in 2020 and the pieces that are coming back from those squads, but you add 2 years of first-year guys that now finally get to make their debut.
You do get an Ivy League education, so.
Right, that is part of the recruiting pitch. That's why the great recruits go to Ivy League schools.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sign me up.
We talked to Jerry Byrne in the past. He's like, yeah, you're going to Harvard. So that's where I lead.
Anybody got a spot for me?
Right.
I might have some eligibility left.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's go to maybe the biggest game of the weekend. Syracuse and Maryland, noon on Sunday. All eyes are going to be at the Carrier Dome for a number of different reasons. So on Tuesdays during the show, we did our headlines from the weekend. So we're going to predict or guess the headline coming from the Syracuse-Maryland game. What are we going to talk about next week after Sunday?
My headline is Maryland pulls away to spoil Gates' day. So that means this will be, I believe, a close contest for about the first 3 quarters. And then you just look up and down that Maryland roster, and I think that they will maybe end up going ahead, 3, 4, 5 goals down the stretch. I think Syracuse is going to ride a lot of momentum. They're going to have that pregame ceremony. It's going to be a lot of energy. They had a huge performance against Holy Cross, and I think there's going to be some adjustment there for Maryland, being the away team, having to sort of deal with all of this and wrap their heads around all this. But at the end of the day, I do think Maryland probably wins by 4 or 5 goals. I'm going to watch the face-off X. That's an interesting thing for me. I was going to bring this up on Tuesday. Of course, you have Fopp for Syracuse, had a great first game, and he's been there for a long time. Luke Weirman, sophomore face-off guy. Last year was at 45%. It's gone 19 for 25 in his first couple games. Did that against Bailey Savio, against Loyola as well. And we talked this past season about all the transfers going to Maryland. That's, of course, a big factor here in who is going to match up with some of those guys on the offensive end. Yeah. But at the same time, Gavin Ty from Virginia, big recruit coming in. He went to Maryland. It's almost like he's pushed Weirman because Ty didn't take most of the face-offs. It was Weirman for Maryland. So you can see some of those transfers not always making that impact necessarily on the score sheet, directly, but just the depth of a program in Maryland helping elevate other players' game. I think it's a really interesting concept of how that's fueled, Maryland and trying to make them a more full team. I don't know if they needed to, but they've done that.
You bring up the ceremony about Gate, and I think the big thing for Syracuse to learn from a couple of years ago when they were celebrating the 100th anniversary of lacrosse at Syracuse, Notre Dame came to the Dome and smoked them. So if you're the men's team, remember that, and if you want the celebration to go on past the game, make sure that doesn't happen again, because that was just, Notre Dame smoked them. Like, Syracuse was never in the game. So a note to be wary if you're the Orange. For me, I think the headline coming from this game is going to be Cuse is a contender. I don't know if they win, but I do think they have a lot to prove in this game, and I think we're going to learn that Syracuse is a better team than some people expected going into the year, because I just don't see Syracuse getting blown out in the Dome. I don't. I see this as a 1-2 goal game where it's close down the stretch. Maybe it's one of those where Syracuse has one of those cardiac Cuse moments and makes a late run and has an opportunity to win the game. I don't know if they win, but I just have a hard time thinking Maryland blows them out. I know Maryland's put up 20 goals in their first 2 games, but I can't see this being a runaway.
It's going to be fascinating watching a guy in Bobby Gavin, been with Virginia and had seen some big games in his time, and now he gets to go be in one of those with Syracuse against this really talented offense and Wisnauskas. And who's going to match up with Donville? Is it Brett Kennedy? And you've got some other guys for Syracuse on the defensive end, Grant Murphy against Wisnauskas maybe. These matchups are going to be really fascinating, and those to me is going to be what determines whether or not maybe one of these teams can go on a run. Because you exploit one of those, and I don't know if Syracuse has the depth right now defensively to do that, but I think that will be something that will help Maryland pull away in the end, in my estimation.
And Syracuse's midfield has to be great. Yeah. Like Tucker Dordovic and Brendan Curry coming out of this game for Syracuse to compete, those 2 guys have to look like All-Americans. Like those, at the end of this game, we have to be talking about Tucker Dordovic, Brendan Curry being first-team All-American candidates because of the performance they put on against Maryland. Like, I think that the Maryland attack is so talented. It's got to be the Syracuse midfield that steps up. The attack has to be a good supporting cast, but the midfield has to create against Maryland's defensive midfield.
Yeah, it'd be interesting because Nolting he had a goal and 6 assists against them as out of the attack position, and then the Maryland did a better job against Lindley and Olmsted the next time around. I'm interested to see what Maryland will do defensively to help mitigate that, knowing where the strength is for Syracuse.
And then where do they put do they short stick one of the attackmen for Syracuse? How do you defensively figure out Syracuse with what they have in the midfield, and then the attack's a little bit more of a question mark.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, what game will surprise you this weekend? What game while watching, you'd be like, wow, what's going on here?
So this one was tough for me because there are a lot of games that maybe when you look at the teams, it might be a surprise, but with what we know now, I don't know if it is. And I don't know if this game falls into it, but it would be, I think, an upset. And I'm thinking maybe UAlbany over Cornell.
Okay.
In talking about an Ivy League debut, it's the first game for Connor Busick as the head coach there at Cornell as he takes over for Peter Millenman, who left during the pandemic. like this UAlbany team. Like, they don't have the headliner like we've had in the past. There's no DeHoga. There's no Connor Fields. But they've got some nice pieces that are back. Corey Younker's still there at attack. I really like Graydon Hogg out of the Hill Academy as an attackman. He's a terrific finisher. I think he can fill it up. It's Cornell's first game in a couple of years, so I don't know what we're going to get. And Will Ramos is back in goal, who finished the season for the Great Danes there in goal as they made a run of the America East Championship game, losing to Vermont. I think they're a contender in the America East in a conference that is very much wide open. And don't be surprised if UAlbany takes it and goes to Cornell and sneaks out a win.
Yeah, I think there's so much unknown with Cornell.
Right.
You lose a guy in Donville, and you just have to find some answers somewhere. They've gotten a lot of practice in. And this is another example of an Ivy League team that doesn't have the game preps and game reps that they needed to have. So I think that maybe UAlbany, if they get off to a good start, I think that could certainly help them down the stretch. I think Cornell's going to get better as that game goes on, for sure.
Oh, for sure, yeah. And think about the last time Cornell played. It was the game we had here against Penn State, and you're looking at Donville and Piatelli and Jeff Teat as the stars. They're gone. It's a whole new ball game for the Big Red.
All right, my game is Ohio State, North Carolina. And I was surprised. I forgot that Ohio State isn't ranked right now.
They're in my top 20 poll. Just a heads up, Buckeyes. You're in my top 20.
North Carolina ranked 5th, and we talked about this leading into the season. I just don't know. And I know they beat Richmond 13-9, Colgate 15-9. I just don't know if the offense is the same for North Carolina. Chris Gray is already to do a lot of the heavy lifting. They've got a good attack unit with Gray, 7 goals, 5 assists. Jacob Kelly, 5 goals, 3 assists in the first couple. But Ohio State is a good attack unit as well. Jack Myers, you hear Nick Myers talk about him and talk about what a stud he is, and he can take over a game at any moment. Already 6 goals, 4 assists. Colby Smith, 7 goals for Ohio State. Jackson Reed as well. But I go back to the face-off X. I know I went there earlier, but this is interesting because Justin Inacio is 88% this year. And my question to Nick Myers, I'm like, how do you replace Ryan Terefenko, on the circle? Because that was a big part of Inacio's success. Well, he said, we'll figure out you cannot replace a Ryan Terefenko, to steal this line from Remember the Titans. But this defenseman, the short stick, Trent DeCicco, I apologize if I get that pronunciation wrong, sophomore from Guelph. In his first 2 games, 14 ground balls playing that face-off wing. Pretty sure almost all of those came off of face-off. So you look at Ohio State and what they were missing coming into this year, and that was it. They were missing basically Ryan Terefenko, and maybe you're trying to piece together, and they have people that can step into those positions based on the culture that Nick Myers has built there. So I like Ohio State in this game.
Yeah.
Flat out. I think that they can go into North Carolina and win. Not easily. A close game. Chris Gray can always go off, but Ohio State, I think, is right there with anybody, and they'll be maybe in the top 20 after this game.
Yeah, I don't think they're being talked about enough.
No.
I do think they are, I think they're a team that should be on par with a Rutgers in the Big Ten. Mm-hmm. Outside of Maryland, I think you have a mix of teams in the Big Ten, whether it's Rutgers, Ohio State, Hopkins. I think they're all right there. I don't think there's a big separation between that group. And so, talk about Ohio State. And I'm glad you brought up Inacio. I had a chance to talk to him following the end of last year. And I'm like, you going back? And he said, yeah, why not? Give it another shot. And he's not being talked about because he's been banged up last couple of years at the face-off X. But remember, this is a guy who's really highly regarded coming out of high school, who has been a really good face-off guy in the Big Ten. He's had guys, whether it was T.D. Erlin before or now Michael Sisselberger, there's guys that kind of have taken the shine, but he's really talented.
Been really consistent over time. It's a committee right now for Carolina, by the way. Zach Tucci's taken most of them, winning about 60%. Tyra is only 2 for 8, and he was the guy last year for the most part. But Chase Mullins, you might remember him from Face-Off Academy and
National
all that.
Showcase.
He can be dangerous. That might be some unknown around him. 9 of 16 so far this year. So that's what Carolina's be throwing at Inacio and that team and that unit in the Face-Off X.
And also, a really cool thing about this game is the tie between Joe Bresci and Ohio State. Obviously, he was at Ohio State when they tragically lost his son, Michael Bresci. So there's really a special bond between these two programs. Really cool to see this game be in the regular season. It's always a fall staple, the two of these programs getting together. So really cool to see them now play during the regular season. Such a cool bond. Obviously, when they're between the lines, it's game time. but there's a really special thing.
We asked Nick Myers about that, right?
We did.
Yeah, maybe go check that out.
A couple of weeks ago.
In our podcast a couple of weeks back, we asked Nick Myers about that. Had a really interesting, great answer to that for sure. All right, best goalie battle. We got John Galloway on the show a little bit later, so we thought we'd give a little shout out to the goalies. The best goalie battle of the weekend goes to.
I'm going to the game that you can see right here on LSN in Towson and Virginia. And you may be saying, well, I mean, neither of these goalies are really like they're All-American candidates. But it's fascinating because of the difference between the two. For Virginia, you have Matthew Nunes, fresh on to the scene, a true freshman, starting just his third collegiate game. Impressive.
Florida, right?
Yeah.
Florida kid.
Impressive to just like walk in here and Texas kid.
Oh, Texas, right, okay.
Walk in here and be a starter right out of the gate. So really impressive for him. He's a really highly regarded recruit. He's facing off against Shane Brennan, the sixth-year goalie for Towson. So you've got a first-year guy in one cage and a sixth-year guy in the other. There may be no greater age difference. You know when they do the Tom Brady thing when he faces like Kyler Murray or Mac Jones?
Yeah.
Like there may be no greater age difference in any game we see between starting goalies than here in LSN against those two. Nunes had a terrific game against High Point. In talking with Lars Tiffany this week, he straight up said that Nunes won them that game against High Point on Sunday. Be interested to see how he responds because, like a young kid, there's a lot of emotions that go through, especially in the early part of the year. How he manages that will be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, fascinating for a freshman to win that job. And it was a little bit up in the air into the fall, and then you saw the transfer of Bobby Gavin to Syracuse. You're like, oh, this Nunes kid is the real deal.
Yeah.
And you hear Lars Tiffany say that, and now he's got to prove it on the field. So, and that comes in all sorts of games. The games that you have to get up for, the games that you might not necessarily be expecting. And I think that is all encompassing. As a freshman, the ups and downs will sort of go along that route and see how they handle it.
And for Shane Brennan, equally as fascinating his journey, a guy who you may remember when Tyler Canto came in. Tyler Canto got that opportunity a handful of years ago because Shane Brennan was hurt. Missed the beginning part of the season. Canto went on and helped them beat number one, became the number one team in the country for a brief moment. And so, like, they weren't going to go back to Shane Brennan. And then he dealt with some injuries some other times. So all of a sudden, now he's a six-year guy. It's his job there in the cage for the Tigers. And it's so cool to see the ups and downs of his career, but him sticking through it and now being a senior leader for them.
Big game for him against that Virginia attack.
Yeah, good luck.
Good luck is right.
Yeah, it's tough.
1 o'clock Saturday?
1 o'clock Saturday right here on LSN.
Okay, I got Rutgers Army. Colin Kirst, I think he's a six-year guy now. He's played 2 seasons now at Rutgers.
Is there really a difference between fifth or sixth year?
He's taken the Charlotte Beatties route. Against an Army team with Wyatt Schupler, who just had a big game against UMass. Schupler, 18 saves in that one. And I forgot, I didn't realize, I figured he was a shoo-in. He wasn't even on the preseason All-American list, Schupler, for Army. So that, to me, a big chip on his shoulder coming into this one. A 14-13 win over UMass in their opener last weekend. And then you got Colin Kirst, the third-team All-American. And I think that the Rutgers game so far, they haven't played an entirely great schedule. LIU, Marist, St. John's, they're 3-0. So these two going up against each other, I think there's some things to prove on both ends. And they'll go against pretty decent offenses at the same time.
Yeah.
Nick Turned 5 goals, 3 assists in his debut. He'll go against Kirst. And then for Rutgers, Mitch Bartolo, the Penn transfer, 10 goals, 2 assists. They're actually led by Ross Scott, 15 points in 3 games, career high for him. So a little bit of some new faces on each of those units, other than Nick Turn, of course, and they'll get to go up against some pretty good goalies. So I think that should be fun.
Yeah, that's going to be a fascinating matchup. Looking forward to that.
That's why I brought it up.
All right, sneaky squad to watch. Who do you keeping your eye on?
Okay, so I'm going with Michigan here, and it's for an interesting reason because they don't play a necessarily good schedule. Just to be honest about that, they beat Bellarmine 22-13. They beat Detroit Mercy 21-5. They've got Holy Cross this week, Canisius, Cleveland State, at Marquette, and then home against Delaware. It gets a little bit tougher after that, but Michigan in a similar schedule in 2020, or last year, 4-3 against some weaker opponents, and they had played Yale that year as well. 3-9. Talking about non-conference.
Yeah.
Last year they were 3-9 in the Big Ten. Different story. But you look at the way they've approached these games, the way they've dominated these games so far, if they go out there and perform and continue to dominate some of these opponents, like I'm not saying they're going to do what Syracuse did to Holy Cross, but if they continue to put up 20-plus goals, I think that they are a team to watch once they head into conference play for sure. Zawada, he's averaging more than 10 points per game right now. It's just a sophomore. He's been incredible. Michael Bohm has 21 goals, 15 assists. So I'm looking more at the dominance of Michigan, not necessarily the opponent, but how much can they dominate people on their way to the Big Ten schedule and a couple tougher games once we head into the month of March, and see from there, because they could be a sneaky team that sneaks up on some teams in the Big Ten after, really showing what they're made of so far. You can only play who you play. And I think if you put some good performance together week after week without any scares, that should show you a lot in what that team's made up of.
I've been waiting for this team and Coach Kevin Connery to really get it figured out because they have some talent. You mentioned Josh Zawada, really, really good player coming out of high school. Yeah. And now that he's gotten his feet wet here in the college game, he's starting to take over the game that I think the way people may have expected him to. They only seem like they're a couple of pieces away. And so as they keep gelling, I mean, if they get a bunch of momentum going into the Big Ten, you mentioned that group. Michigan could be right in that group of Ohio State, Rutgers, Hopkins, teams contending for just below Maryland for the 2 spot.
Yeah, I think so too. And last year, you kind of can't throw it out, but you get some time with a younger team, a younger program now to figure out what you're all about during the non-conference schedule this year.
Yeah, for sure. My team is St. Joe's.
Okay.
They speak about the Big Ten. They take on Penn State here on Saturday. They get to host Penn State. Big moment for the Hawks. This St. Joe's team played Delaware really tough earlier this week. It was a 1-goal game. They've gotten terrific contributions from Matt Bomer so far. He's leading the way with 10 points in a couple of games, 6 goals and 4 assists. And Zach Cole on the season is 73% at the faceoff X. He's a preseason All-American at the faceoff position. He's one of the best. And so if you're getting the ball for St. Joe's, you're giving your offense more opportunities. And so for me, keep an eye on St. Joe's. I would not be surprised if they knock off Penn State. It's been a really tough week for the Nittany Lions, but they better come to play because St. Joe's gave a Delaware team that I have pretty high hopes for this year, gave them all they could handle earlier this week to a 1-goal game, and St. Joe's had a chance down the stretch to tie it up in a final possession. Just a terrific defensive play by Owen Grant to help finish it off. But keep an eye on St. Joe's. I would not be surprised if they walked away with a win over Penn State.
All right, see if they sneak up on somebody. That is our sneaky segment for the day.
All right.
So let's move on. Quick picks. We're going down the docket of women's games so far here, starting with
you got the first one.
Number 6, Duke 2-0 at William and Mary, 4 p.m. Friday. I got Duke winning 15-10, and I think that William and Mary might make this interesting. Belmont Siri, of course, we talked about her last week, one of the better scorers in the conference, if not the country, if she gets going. Also alongside Lauren Russell. She actually leads them in scoring. 6 goals, 2 assists. Duke, though, 6th in the nation for a reason, as Katie DeSimone, 13 goals and an assist in a couple of games so far this year. Don't forget, Duke beat Maryland in the NCAA tournament last year. That's why they're ranked in the top 10, and they continue to have Maddie Jenner at the draw control, which to me is a big difference maker for them, and she has been for a long time. So I do have Duke. I think they get more possessions, more opportunities, and with their talent and athleticism, able to keep it out of the offense. So Matiri's hands long enough to win this one.
Just want to remind everybody, I went perfect 5-0 last week in my picks here in the women's game, including William and Mary over Villanova. So just a heads up.
Yeah, I mean, William and Mary's had that nice win. They dropped one to Richmond after that.
Yeah.
So let's see if maybe they can give Duke a scare.
Get some good things going on. All right.
Congratulations, Travis.
Thank you. Speaking of Maryland, I got Maryland and Virginia. This is a terrific game, a statement opportunity, I think, for both teams, because you got Virginia, who is, I think, still waiting for that stamp of, hey, we are a top 5 team that deserves to be in the top 5 all the time. Maryland, the opportunity to say the statement of, hey, we're back, and I think that's what's going to happen. I like the Terps 16-13. Aurora Cordingley, the Hopkins transfer, with 5 goals in her debut for Maryland, a blowout win against St. Joe's. Both teams put up 20 goals this past weekend. I don't think they get there because I think both defenses are better than that, But I think it could be a back-and-forth affair, but I like the Terps.
First leg of the weekend for Virginia. We'll get to their game against Princeton in a moment. Now we'll go to out west, Denver at Stanford. This is a 9 p.m. Friday night game.
Let's go.
Prime time, baby. I have Denver winning in a close one, 14-13. I like Denver's experience. Their junior attacker, Julia Gilbert, 6 goals so far. That was in the one game against Louisville. They won 19-9. Babe Berin, she's been there for a long time, grad student, 4 goals there. Kaylee Lammers, midfielder, a goal, 4 ground balls, 4 caused turnovers in their opener, too. So I like the do-it-all nature there. Stanford, okay, they had the loss to Syracuse. Were competing in that game for a long time. Kind of a controversial win against Albany, a 1-goal win at that down there on I-90.
So goal on the side of the cage.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a funky finish. And I don't know if they would call that weekend a failure for Stanford. I think maybe they wanted to produce a little
disappointing.
Bit more. A little disappointing. But we are seeing what we thought going into the season. Ashley Humphrey, redshirt freshman, 4 goals, 13 assists, and 2 goals games played. Annabelle Frist, true freshman, 9 goals and assists, 11 draw controls, and 3 caused turnovers. I just like the experience of Denver in this spot going to Stanford. And I think what we're forgetting about Stanford, yes, they've got all these talented redshirt freshmen, all this talented freshman class. They're still very young. At the end of the day. So it's going to take them a couple years to sort of realize this. And when you play a more veteran-laden team, I think that Denver will be able to outweigh them this time around.
It may not even take a couple years, but a handful of games of experience, I think, makes a big difference for Stanford.
Denver's also won the last 5 against Stanford. So some of that familiarity also helps.
All right, let's go back to Baltimore. Charles Street Rivalry Women's Edition. We got Loyola at Hopkins to kick off the season for the Greyhounds. And I like the Hounds. We mentioned Aurora accordingly. She would be a big help for Hopkins if she was still in a Blue Jays uniform. On the other side, Liffey Rosenzweig is back for the Greyhounds, and she is one of the best players in the country. If you haven't seen her play, make sure you tune in at some point to see the Greyhounds play. I like the Hounds 15-11 in this one.
And that game, 11 a.m. Saturday. So you get to start off. Maybe you're usually used to the noon game starting things off 11 a.m. So you get to start off a little bit earlier on Saturday.
Like that.
Yeah. All right. So my next game here, number 2 North Carolina at number 7 Florida. Love this matchup.
Huge.
12 p.m. Saturday. Let's go right to the goal because I did, of course, as we know, the North Carolina and James Madison game over the weekend. And North Carolina goes on to win that game 15-8. But the goalie for James Madison, Molly Doherty, made 15 saves. She was incredible. So Sarah Resnick, you're up next, and good luck because this is a very talented North Carolina team. I think Resnick is every bit ready to go. It's just North Carolina defensively do too well on the back end, in my estimation, against anybody. And I think sometimes people forget about Emma Trenchard and Knowles and Moreno. And it's tough when they continue to give the ball back to that offense. And Jamie Ortega, who now has embraced feeding a little bit more. I talked about this on Tuesday. Ortega, already this season, 5 assists to go along with 6 goals. Not necessarily always a feeder, but I think she's implemented that into her game. 13-9 North Carolina. Florida, watch out for their freshman, Emma Lopinto. 6 goals, 2 assists in the opener there. And the draw should be fun, too, with Paisley Egan against Emily Mastriani. So there should be some fun little matchups in this game. I think it'd be pretty fun to watch, too.
Talk about a nice early test for those young freshmen and sophomore attackers for Florida. Hey, here you go. Go up against maybe the best defense in the country.
Good luck. And maybe the best offense. And arguably with Boston College, of course.
All right, speaking of JMU, UConn versus the Dukes. This one in Sparks, Maryland at USA Lacrosse headquarters.
Okay.
JMU needs a win. They not only lost to North Carolina this past weekend, they then had kind of a disappointing loss against Virginia Tech on Wednesday. Won a game I think that JMU probably expected to win. So I like the Dukes, but I think this one's close. I like them 12-11, a matchup between two teams that are right there in the top 25 in the women's poll. UConn, I think probably would have liked to taking care of business a little bit easier against Fairfield. That was a 2-goal game in their opener. So I think this is a battle between two teams that want to put a good step forward, but I'm going to go with the Dukes, 12-11.
It's a big game for UConn as a program. We talked to Sydney Watson back a few weeks ago, and you could feel that they are ready to take a step forward as a program, and beating a team like JMU could be one of those steps that we've been talking about. So I'm really intrigued for that matchup.
And a big game for James Madison. Remember, they're not eligible for the CAA tournament, so these early season games against non-conference opponents, like if you want to put yourself in the NCAA tournament picture, like if they become more important now for James Madison than maybe ever before.
Absolutely. All right, Princeton at Virginia. So Virginia's second game of the weekend, 12 p.m. Sunday. I like Princeton in this
really?
one. You got Marge Donovan on the back end, the senior. You got Kyla Sears offensively, Chris Saylor in her last season. And also there's this aspect, and we'll talk about Ivy League, of course, all day long, but there's not much tape right now on a lot of these teams. So
especially not Princeton.
Princeton at that point is going to have 3 games to watch of Virginia and say, we know exactly what they do, and a coaching staff led by a legend. I just like the way that Princeton, I think, will go about things in this game, just for lack of anything else. I think Virginia, like we said, Morgan Schwab been really good. She had 49 points last year as a freshman, 3 goals, 7 assists this year. I like what Virginia's done, but I think Princeton is primed and ready to be one of the top teams in the Ivy League this year. And I think that they're going to prove that from day one.
Talk about a tough 2-game weekend for Virginia.
Yeah, that's not fun.
That is not an easy stretch.
You split and you're doing pretty well.
Yeah, I 100% take a split for the Cavs.
Yeah.
Speaking of big games, we talked about Syracuse on the men's side. Syracuse for the women, a huge game as well. Number 3 Cuse against number 4 Stony Brook. Before this game, they're honoring Katie Rowan, just the second women's player in Syracuse athletics history to have her number up in the rafters of the Carrier Dome. Well-deserved, an absolute legend in the women's program for Syracuse. So a big moment in the Dome here for this one. And I like Syracuse, but I think this is going to be a really good game. Stony Brook's opener, which I think is going to hurt the Seawolves. I think Syracuse was able to figure some stuff out. Megan Tyrell is just on a tear to start the year. 11 goals, 3 assists for 14 points in 2 games. The goalie situation for the Orange is very interesting. I'll be curious to see how Kayla Traynor deals with this. Delaney Schweitzer has started the first couple of games, but Kimber Hauer has come in each of them, including the second half against Stanford, and played really well in the second half against the Cardinal after the transfer to Delaney Schweitzer struggled in that first half. So keep an eye on the Orange goalie battle in this one, but I think they have enough offensively. Stony Brook still has a bunch of new pieces that have to figure things out. It could be a coming out party for the Seawolves, but I like the Orange 14-12.
I think Joe Spallina said it's the most talented roster he's had since being at Stony Brook. So
Joe Spallina has said that how many times probably throughout his career?
Maybe they keep on getting better and better. I got your back, Joe. Don't worry. Good goalie, Cameron Halsall, back for
yes.
They're going to be competing against
Canadian national team player.
That should be a good game. 4 p.m. Sunday. Good time slot. Love that.
Yes.
Sort of separated from everybody else. I got Hofstra at Army. So you've got Shannon Smith, the Northwestern, against Michelle Tumalo, Syracuse.
Good,
a nice little thing going on there. It's been a struggle. We talked about Army and Tumalo. The cupboard a bit bare. A lot of people graduated from Army. They've struggled in their first couple games. Hofstra, an 8-5 win over Long Island. They're sort of figuring life out without Alyssa Perella and Alexa Matera. And I do inch away towards the Hofstra side of things. My score for this one, 10-6. Hofstra there. Katie Whalen had an assist in the opener. I think that she's the one who might have to step up into those shoes. They still have Shannon Boyle on defense, and she's taking most of the draw controls after Darcy Smith graduated. And they have also Jess Smith in goal for Hofstra, too, that can also provide some experience back there and keep it a pretty low-scoring game, as you can see, as both these teams trying to just figure themselves out at this point of the season.
All right, final game to pick. We've got Cornell at Villanova.
Okay.
Jill Batchelor, new head coach at Villanova, came over from Drexel after that terrific year for the Dragons, still looking for that first win. I think it comes here. Cornell, once again, Ivy League, we're not sure what we're going to get from all of these programs. Are you going to get the super hungry? Great. Is it going to be sloppy? I don't know. I like the Wildcats 11-9. Third game for Villanova, just the first for Cornell. I think that makes a difference. Villanova has been hungry, they've been just been this close in those first couple of games for Jill Batchelor. I think they get her that first win in her tenure at Villanova this weekend.
Well, Travis, I hope you go undefeated again this week.
I hope so too. That would be good. 5-0.
So you guys go back and watch the tape. I can't remember what. I think I missed 1 or 2. I don't know. Maybe I went undefeated, but I didn't really look.
I don't think you did. I think you missed a couple.
But I did, and you'll hear it in a moment. I did pick my bowl prediction last week was Jacksonville to beat Duke, and I'll bring that up to John Galloway in a second. And the winners of the big game over Duke over the weekend were the Jacksonville Dolphins. Their head coach, John Galloway, joins us now.
So coming off that gigantic win, we have Jacksonville coach John Galloway joining us now. John, thanks so much for taking the time. I know it's been a busy week for you guys and an eventful week for you. Just take me back to Sunday, going into that game. What was the feeling in the locker room, and how did you feel going against Duke, a program that you obviously know very well?
Yeah, it's funny. I went home last night and spoke with my wife, and I said, the Duke game, it really does feel like 2 weeks ago with so much that's happened over the past few days. And going into the game, though, and trying to think back and not shy away from the fact that it was such a meaningful moment for us. I think the most important thing we talked about Saturday night in the hotel was we have to be a little bit crazy. We have to be a little bit crazy in our expectations of ourselves to win this game. And I asked the guys to make their visions and their dreams and their expectations a little bit more outside of the norm. And I thought it was a risk. I thought it was a risk in that, we could maybe create this inflation in our mind of what the results could be. And then how do you handle the difficult result? But we felt like this team was just mature enough that they could handle that challenge. And obviously I thought you saw that throughout the game on Sunday afternoon.
John, I know I wasn't surprised. I picked you guys to win. I don't know if you saw that or not. But the bigger thing here is it didn't seem like you were too surprised by that. Like you said, you felt like you had the maturity to go out there and perform. Why was that not surprising to you to be able to go out there and do what you did?
Well, I do have to point out that I do have your clips saved of both of you guys talking about the other teams in our conference that I shared with our team in the preseason. So I appreciate that initial motivation anyways. I think it goes back. I appreciate that. I think it goes back to the Hopkins game. I thought the locker room and the response after that game was that of accountability and positivity. And the reason why I say those two things is I think there was a genuine expectation amongst our locker room that we would be more successful and or win that first game. And those moments, those lessons learned in that game, the confidence we drew from that allowed us to feel confident going into the Duke game. And listen, that's a unique opponent. I mean, I think Duke is the cream of the crop in so many different areas of the game, but we felt like, all right, we can play with the Blue Bloods if we execute, and we have to get away from the emotion of playing a Duke or playing a Johns Hopkins. We have to get away from that. We just have to focus on execution, pace of play, our ability to play for 60 minutes. And I think a lot of that came to fruition on Sunday afternoon.
You hit on executing, and I think that's really key because it's really easy for the underdog to go into a blue blood like that and be pumped up and come out raring to go, maybe score a couple of early goals, but then the blue blood takes over and calms down and finishes it off because you can't keep that energy. But you guys had the maturity to be able to keep that and withstand the run that you knew Duke was going to make. Who were the guys that were key in making sure that everybody knew, like, all right, we can handle this, and we've been here before in other games, and we could do that here against even a better opponent?
Yeah, it's well said. I mean, you can't. I think you saw that in the other Duke games. Vermont made that a great game at halftime, and then right after that, you saw Manhattan make it a great game. And it's Duke eventually is going to open the floodgates. Unfortunately for us, it was late enough that the clock ran out. But the leaders in our locker room make sure that there's a steady, just presence on the sideline. It's Jack Dolan. It's Max Waldbaum, it's Colin Hinton, it's Dixon Smith, it's Jeremy Winston. It's guys that have been with us for 4 or 5 years. Max is obviously a unique one. I said, you know what, we belong here, but we got to keep playing our game. And I think what you saw at the end of the fourth was we started to allow Duke to create the pace. And we said going in the game, we have to play with our pace, win or loss throughout the game, and you'll be able to maintain that same level of execution. So we put the schedule together knowing that those guys were in our locker room again this year, and you have to be able to lean on your locker room, and those are the guys that are pioneering us right now.
Did you learn more about your team against Duke or against Mercer? Because that was a trap game of all trap games, John. I guess 2 days later, you go out there and win the next time around 48 hours later. What game did you learn more about your team from?
I think you hit the nail on the head. The Mercer game, to have to get back on the bus, we hit traffic on the way up there. We get there late. We have to kind of rush our warm-ups. Mercer is motivated, excited. They have a great. We go 8 for 34 at the faceoff X. I mean, everything that should have happened for us to lose that game potentially did. And our leaders said, no, this is not how we're going to do this. Before the game, Coach Cornelli made a great point that Max Waldbaum and Jack Dolan aren't here to go 1-1. They're here to win every game that they have a chance to win left in their career. And I felt that in the first half of the Mercer game.
You talk about some of the transfers like a Max Waldbaum, and I think the other important one for you guys early in the season has been Luke Milliken. What kind of luxury is it to have a guy who has competed in the ACC and started at North Carolina come to your program and now be able to bring that kind of presence of he's certainly not going to be afraid of any game you guys play after having experienced that early in his career?
Yeah, I think, Luke, it's been so cool to see the success he's had early on, but we went into the season and really we still have the option to play three different goalies. We went in the Johns Hopkins game with the plan to split halves. Ryan Delarocca is a freshman for us that's been playing at a high level. Jason Yoquino is a preseason all conference guy in our conference. And then Luke has come in and has provided such leadership and poise in the clearing game. And obviously Luke played well those first two games. Ryan got a chance to get in the Mercer game and show himself. And then Jason Yoquino maybe is our most consistent goalie right now at practice. So we have three guys in that room, and I love it. I consider it a bullpen, and it's frustrating for me as a coach to be able to show that to them because the goalie position is so kind of rides on waves of momentum, and there's only one guy. Whereas we have three right now in our bullpen that could step up, and I think Luke has done a great job of taking the bull by the horns, metaphorically, in the first three games, and really continued to keep himself as a starter.
Is that a sense of pride for you, as a goalie yourself, to have that be a productive position?
I think it's a sense of pride that we can maintain that level of relationship in that room. I know how important it is to be in there. I've been in rooms like that, with Blaze Riordan and Sean Scanone and, guys that are all American, all conference, all MLL goalies. And then we all come together and you have to continue to move the mission forward. And I think that those three have done that even this morning at practice. I don't know who the best one was. Now I have to go back and watch a film because I think all three of them are playing at a really high level.
It's a good luxury to have. John, your culture to me in what we've seen early in the year is really special because you do have the veteran guys like Jack Dolan who have been around, but to bring in a bunch of transfers that are talented, and then you obviously have to have competition, but it's really hard to have competition that's fierce for starting roles and then have guys that are getting beat out that maybe played a year ago or 2 years ago and have them still feel like they're part of the team. How have you figured out a way to do that where you're creating the competition in practice, but everybody's still pulling for each other on game day?
That's a great question. It's something we face the challenge every day, but something we've shifted our mindset to is not making this a team, a one set approach for the team. So for example, after a game on Tuesday, I think that the initial thought is, okay, give the guys off, right? It's a day where we need to rest, but we knew that there's a lot of guys that still are developing or have played a lot of minutes that need a chance for us to evaluate them. So those off days have become development days for the guys that aren't playing in games. And, a great example of it on Monday after the Duke game, Carson Dixon's a young man that comes out, hasn't played a ton. We have some pretty good depth at the defense, but he comes out and he plays at a really high level for an hour at practice. And we get to coach him, and we get to coach Curtis Goddard, who started attack for us last year and now is on the other end of the depth chart. But man, he comes in and he's fierce in the competition at practice. And now Carson Dixon gets meaningful minutes in the Mercer game because of the ability to provide himself a chance on Monday. And I think those moments are really rewarding for the guys that aren't getting a ton of playing time, that there is still a chance. If you continue to grind and you continue to stay on track with our developmental plan throughout the season, you can have a chance on game day. And we're constantly evaluating the depth chart.
You sort of speak about that culture and the chemistry, and I don't know if anybody saw, but USA Lacrosse Magazine put together a powerful piece about Jeremy Winston and his father, Dennis, who passed away in January. How important, has that culture been in supporting him during this tough time and each other at the same time too?
Yeah, I don't know any culture that can handle that perfectly. Again, I told Jeremy the first time he called me and let me know. There was no words that I could share that is going to make him feel any better. But what I could guarantee him was that at some day when he realizes that the weight of all that he's carrying right now becomes too much, he's got 50 guys to help him carry that. And Jeremy hasn't flinched once. He didn't. I mean, at the funeral, the services, his first game back, he's been the steady leader. But at some point, the beauty of sports is we need to be here for it. And it might be a month from now, it might be a year from now, it might be 5 years from now when Jeremy's no longer playing for us. The weight of all that he's carrying right now in the midst of our season and trying not to let that show is gonna weigh him down. And I hope he knows that we are going to be here for him regardless. And I just couldn't be more proud of him. He's a man well above his years, and he's handling it a hell of a lot better than I ever would.
That says a lot about him as a young man. I know you guys got games to look forward to, and you got to put the Duke game in the rearview mirror. But broad picture, if you can, for us for a second, when you look at that Duke win, what does that mean for what you have been trying to establish in Jacksonville and what you hope to continue to build on?
Well, at first, I have to make sure everybody knows, and I make it very clear that to thank Coach Janowski for letting us play them. I think people forget that they don't have to play these games. They don't have to play these double headers. They don't have to play all the teams in the Southern Conference. Coach Janowski does that because he knows without him playing us, I don't know who does schedule us. And his willingness to play us really without any benefit to them shows how much the game means to him. And I think everybody says that, but Coach Janowski practices it. Where obviously that win for us, I go back to Hopkins too. It provides belief. It provides belief in our locker room, in our administration, to the recruits that are committing to our vision, which is now becoming a reality. And also, I think to our staff to understand that this isn't an overnight fix. But if you stay steady, we stole something from a great book I read recently that when catastrophe hits, you have to fall on your credo. And, those are our core values. And when chaos or when success hits, you still fall back on your credo. And that's really what we focused on over the last 72 to 96 hours. And really going into this big game against Marquette on Saturday is, listen, highs, lows, changes of emotion, nothing will break our credo. And that's what we have to focus on going into the rest of the season.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's a great philosophy, too.
Yeah, for sure.
John, what's retirement like as a player? Does it I know,
yeah.
I know it hasn't really, mattered just yet, but
yeah. Well, I think the first thing is, Joel and I are hoping that they don't kick us out of the group chat because I need that in my life. It hasn't hit. It hasn't hit probably until February, March, where training starts to really pick up and the conversation in the group picks up, and then obviously that first training camp, not being in the locker room. I don't know if it'll hit me till then, but it's funny. Joel and I were joking when the PLL released their schedule the other day, or the games. It's like the first time, we're looking at our calendars for vacation and when are we going to get together? And it's like, we don't have to wait till April to find out if we have a weekend off in August. So there's a little bit of freedom to it. There's a little bit of renewed commitment to this place and how much they've given to me, how much I want to give back to them, and being able to know that I don't have to worry about if I'm going to give up any more 2-pointers lets me sleep a little bit more sound in the evening.
I just hope there isn't a day where you text Joel and you're like, hey, have you got any messages lately from the group? You both sort of realize that you're not in it anymore. I
am going to ask Coach Sudan to create some sort of subsidiary role for me, just so they don't take me out of the group chat.
John, I got to say, you've gotten soft, and I know you've admitted it. It's 70 degrees there, and you're wearing a sweatshirt. We were joking, that was your campus, stroll through Syracuse, and it was 15 degrees and snowing, and you were wearing a hooded sweatshirt.
I was going to practice. It's 74 now, and it's going to get up to 80 by 4:00 today. And we practiced in the morning. And the other day we were getting ready for practice, and I went and I grabbed my winter hat to head out there, and it was 59 degrees. And I had to challenge my level of toughness mentally and physically there. And I went and put it back. But yeah, I've gotten soft, but again, we're pretty spoiled down here. To practice at 6:30 this morning, and I think it was in the 60s. Life is pretty darn good.
They're going to pull your Central New York card.
I know. Hopefully not many people from upstate watch this, but my parents know. They know how soft I've gotten. But yeah, we're spoiled.
Hey, John, seriously, congratulations so much. So happy for what you guys were able to accomplish this past weekend. We can't wait to see what you guys do the rest of the year. We'll catch up soon.
I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me.
Cool. Thanks, John.
So a terrific talk with head coach John Galloway. Yeah. He's soft, but he spent a couple years in Florida.
He did wear pants, though. So, he always wore the pants, even in the midst of a carrier dome that probably was 80 degrees because it's really hot and humid in there no matter the time of year.
I just remember John Galloway and those Syracuse lacrosse players walking across campus when I was there, and they're wearing a hooded sweatshirt, and it's 15 degrees because that's the cool
shorts,
gear.
with shorts on.
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
And
not Galloway.
And now he's wearing a sweatshirt, and it's 70 outside. So, anyway, had to give him a hard time.
He's been down there, more than a decade, right? He's been a long time.
Not that long. Handful of years.
Okay.
Anyway, but seriously, big shout out to that program. Such a cool win and an awesome moment for John Galloway as a head coach.
Yeah, and cool to talk to him, and looking forward to seeing what they do this year.
For sure.
All right, the game we will watch this weekend, appointment television in the NCAA, Travis.
So I can only technically watch the first half of this game live because then I've got to get ready to do my game, Towson, Virginia, here at 1 o'clock on LSN. But noon Saturday, we've got Denver and Duke. We haven't spoken about this game yet, and I think Denver is very much flying under the radar. They're out west. I mean, they're one of those programs now that unless they're playing a big name early on, like they play in Duke and North Carolina, or they are a team that's top 5 considered early on, like you kind of forget about them at the beginning part of the season, and then you start to remember, oh yeah, they're pretty darn good. They've got maybe the best to ever coach the game in Bill Tierney out there.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see what Denver has this year. I think they've had a up and down start to the year. They're still trying to find some different pieces offensively. This game's going to tell us a lot about what they have. And for Duke, how do they respond? Like, what does this team do coming off that loss to Jacksonville? Because that's a loss that we see from Duke a lot, but we've also seen Februarys where they lose a couple of these games and then they figure it out. Do they figure it out right away, or is it another learning experience for the Blue Devils and John Danowski's squad? So I'm very excited to see what Denver has, especially in this.
Yeah, and if they change anything, right? If Duke decides to go a different direction, work the ball through different players, different people, and I think that's always
they got a lot of options.
They got a lot of people to be able to do so, and once they find the formula, they click, and they're off to the races. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to that game, too. I'm going to go, though, with one I talked about earlier, Penn and Georgetown, because there's so much that intrigues me about this game. I'm intrigued about Georgetown and exactly how high they can fly. You know, if they go out and make a statement, no matter if it's against a team that hasn't played in 2 years or not, people are going to be looking at them like, okay, maybe they're more legit than, you know, they're getting it done, I guess, at the end of the day, because we know that they're legit, but it's whether they can get it done in the big moments at this point for their program. So
yeah, it's how legit are you after you got blown out by Virginia in the quarterfinals?
Yes.
You know?
Right. You got to go out there and prove it again until you don't, until that doesn't happen anymore. And then Penn, we talked about, first time seeing them in a long time. What does Sam Hanley have in store for us this year? Because I think it's an awful lot, and he could be a game changer. I mean, this could be a moment in the Sam Hanley in this year. This could be his year. Like, we can't underestimate the fact that he could be the guy that everyone's talking about at the end winning the Tewaaraton Award.
I mean, people are saying he's bigger and stronger than he was a couple of years ago. And, like, his freshman year, he was running over guys.
Yeah.
In the Ivy League, like against Yale, who has some of the biggest defenders that you'll see in the country. So, I mean, if he's bigger and stronger and faster than he was a couple of years ago when we saw him, then we could be in for a special season from Sam Hanley.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to see the Ivy League back. I think I'm so excited.
It feels right.
Yeah, it feels full again. You know, our cup was half empty, half full at the time of last year.
half full.
Okay, that's a nice mentality.
Yeah.
I'm the kind of half full person too. But
I
just felt a little empty without.
What I will say in voting for the Inside Lacrosse Media Poll this past week, when you look at the Ivy League schools, you're trying to figure out like who's in the top 10, and like there's so much unknown. And there's still going to be unknown after this week, but at least now, like, you look at something and you're not just looking at it on paper anymore, you're looking at it on the field, and you have real results to be able to talk about these teams. Because until that, now, it's just everything's on paper, which is fine, but until you actually see how it looks on the field, you have no idea.
Limitless paper in a paperless world.
All right. Michael Scott.
Unlimited paper in a paperless world. Is that the line? Anyway,
I forget.
Let's go to the NLL.
Great commercial.
What are you watching in the NLL this weekend?
I said this earlier this week during Power Rankings. I can't wait for Rush Mammoth on Sunday, 5 o'clock Eastern time, out there in Colorado. Two teams that have completely opposite records. You got the Mammoth at 5-2, the Rush at 2-5, and quite frankly, I don't know who's better. Because, like, in terms of talent,
Mammoth are right now. Yeah.
Well, yeah, in terms of the results,
5-2.
But in terms of talent, I don't know. I could argue at points with what the Rush have and what they've done in the past that maybe they are the better team of these two. They just haven't played that way. So I think this is a huge game for the Rush, especially because they need to, like, you don't want to dig yourself into too big of a hole. I think they've got a lot of talent, but they got to figure this out soon. You start falling to 2-6, 2-7, the road to the playoffs becomes a lot more difficult than if you get back here to 3-5 and you got another win over Colorado. So this is a big game on Sunday.
The West tough. It's a tough conference for sure. You got the Seals up there and Mammoth at the top as well. So you got to sort of find your way and get wins like this.
And the Seals have only one loss
to get
too.
Back into the conversation at the very least. I'm going to the East. Albany against Buffalo. See if Buffalo bounces back. Albany as well. Albany with that recent surge though. After I think they won 3 in a row or something like that. But it looked like they were dead as a doornail at one point this year bad. They were getting blown out, and then all of a sudden the flip switched, and they've been playing a lot better. So Buffalo maybe showing they're a little bit more vulnerable. I know it was against Toronto, and that they've always played them tough, but this could be a prove-it game for Albany to go out there and compete with Buffalo at the end of the day. I think this should be a lot of fun to see what they can do against the Bandits, who, like Travis has said, he thinks they're the most talented team in the league.
Yeah. For sure.
So I bet it'll be a fun game to watch.
Yeah, the Fighting Charlie Kitchens, the Firewolves. They also grab yourselves a couple of spiked seltzers from the Firewolves collection, and enjoy yourself a game. They sell those in the Albany area.
Okay.
So now you know.
All right. Sure.
You're going to the game. Grab a couple. They look good. Let us know how they are. I want to give it a try.
Thank you for that, Travis. And thank you all for watching. We appreciate it.
That's what I'm here for.
Enjoy the games this weekend, and we'll see you. We'll wrap everything up on Tuesday, right?
Yeah, we'll see you right back here. 2 more episodes coming your way next week.